Welcome to Pedo Teeth Talk, brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, a podcast show that delivers cutting-edge ideas for the professionals specializing in pediatric dentistry.
Thank you for tuning in to Pedo Teeth Talk, where we bring you the contemporary issues important to you and your practice. Brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. I'm your host, Joel Berg. We're here today with Lilly Cortes-Pona. LCP Dental Team Coaching, formerly known as Julie Weir and Associates, have been serving pediatric dentists and their teams since 1996. Lilly Cortes-Pona, the owner of LCP, was a consulting associate for Julie Weir for 3 years before acquiring the consulting firm 6 years ago. LCP writes the Practice Management Marketing, PMM, newsletter for the AAPD and has been doing so for almost 16 years. The PMM is published 4 times a year in the Pediatric Dentistry Today magazine. Lilly has over 24 years of experience in dentistry, and since she went through the transition of buying an existing company, knows firsthand the challenges that owner dentists struggle with each day. And in particular, today, in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis, has a lot of good words of advice for us regarding practice management and regarding a recovery plan, and that's what we want to talk about today. So, Lilly, thank you so much for being with us today on Pedo Teeth Talk.
Thank you, Joel. My pleasure.
So, Lilly, I want to just jump to, you've heard a lot about the challenges that are, a lot about the challenges faced by practices, obviously, that have hit everybody. So what are the top 3? What are the big 3 things you're seeing that practices are facing due to the crisis, and the ones that doctors should be focusing on?
Yes, thank you. First is employee management. I see that at the top of the list. Some of the things are what to do with their team members while the office is closed, how to keep them motivated and interested in their positions, and how to reintegrate them to the practice. Second is how to manage patients and parents until the practice can open again. And third, the best ways to cash flow quickly again.
So that reemergence thing that I mentioned is that last one. So if you could talk about the employee management one, we'll take these one at a time. And the employee management in regard to this, what are your thoughts in regard to this?
It's very important to identify your key performers, usually a clinical coordinator or an assistant with leadership potential, and utilize them to help keep in touch with parents and see emergency patients. Also, try to keep your office manager or a key front office person employed either part-time or full-time, depending on the size of your practice. This would be someone who could handle incoming calls, rescheduling appointments, continue to process insurance payments and billing, and continue to make social media posts. Make sure this person has a clear, revised job description and you have a mutual agreement on expectation. If your office has a shelter-in-place order, like many states do, this trusted person can work remotely from home by logging into the practice software and collecting mail twice a week. Also, they can either have the office phone forwarded to their cell phone, or if the office has a voice-over internet provider, they can take an office phone home. Doctors can also buy a cheap cell phone if they don't already have one for the practice and have that phone ring separately from the manager's personal cell phone.
And what about the patients then? So that's the employees, and you're talking about at least the maintenance of a skeleton crew in order to manage the activities of the practice remotely in this case. What about the patients? And I've heard a lot of really great messages out there to patients. I've seen some wonderful examples in different offices of what the recording says when you call the office in terms of what's going on. What can you tell us about that?
I believe that the communication has to be consistent. So therefore, your website, social media, your office voicemail should all have the same message, letting them know how much they value their patients. And in this time, they're doing everything possible to make sure that they still take care of their patients and follow all CDC and OSHA protocols for safety purposes.
So the patients need to be given the best information, but in terms of actually seeing the patients, if we're shelter in place or whatever the orders may be on a state-specific basis, we're still seeing emergencies, and doctors have figured out good ways of determining what an emergency is and then seeing them.
Yes.
Any particular messaging for us on that one?
I've heard of some offices utilizing teledentistry in order to see patients. We always know doctors have been for the longest time having pictures emailed to them and things like that. It's just a matter of making sure that the patients do not feel forgotten, that if a parent does reach out to the doctor with an emergency, that we do get back to them right away.
So you were talking about employee management. Go back to that for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about the maintenance of staff who can manage the activities of the office that still need to be managed.
Yes.
Obviously, many practices have had to furlough employees in this very difficult time. What kind of strategy would you recommend to stay connected during this closure time, or you might call it strategic management of those that may be fully employed, partially employed, or furloughed?
Yes, this goes back to the communication. That is key with our parents, with our employees, creating a weekly Zoom or go-to meeting video conference to stay in touch with members. I've heard from clients has worked really well. Keep them updated. A lot of doctors wonder, well, what am I going to talk with them about? Keep them updated on what is going on with the practice, thoughts on reopening date when we get closer to knowing what that will be, and just I think that for the doctors and the leaders of the practice, it's very important to keep our team members encouraged during these uncertain times and letting them know we will do everything in our power to get back up and running as quickly as possible and how much we value each and every one of them. And also for employers who had to lay off or furlough employees, I've heard that some employees are asking, are needing to know exactly what their role is going to be or how long this is going to be. I think, again, talking to them as much as possible as to what the doctor sees and what the reality is also very helpful.
So, a lot of offices and doctors have been exemplary in how they've managed through this situation. I'm hearing all kinds of heroic and wonderful stories. Some have stepped back to watch what others are doing before deciding. So for those who have not deployed things in, let's say, the way you've recommended or in the way that they would want to do, is it hard in the middle of this crisis? Because we're still deep in the middle of it for at least several more weeks, for a month or more.
Yeah.
What can they do to kind of go back and take corrective action on the processes they've deployed along the lines of communication in the areas you've described?
Yeah, I thank you. That's a great question. And I also, interestingly enough, I'm glad you asked me that because I have a client who normally was not comfortable having meetings with his team. And I encouraged him to do the weekly touch-in, the video. It doesn't matter. It's never too late to start and do things correctly with the team and to just say, look, I've heard this valuable information. I understand that this would be a great way for all of us to see each other. You can all see one another as well and just collaborate and talk about what's happening in your lives right now. I'd love for us to have a way to stay in touch. And he told me that it was so refreshing to be able to meet with them, even though he had never met in this capacity, and to be able to see everyone and just to tell them how much he values and appreciates them and how much it meant for him to be able to do that too.
Yeah, I remember, I remember in my first year of dental school a long time ago, we had a part of our community dentistry course. There was a book partially written by one of our faculty at the University of Iowa called Communication in the Dental Office. And, communication is something that I've always believed is a skill set that we need much more of as the dental community.
Yes.
Some people are naturally good at it and they do it well. I think most are not as naturally good at it. And you just described an example.
Yes.
So I think this actually is this time, as difficult as things are, provides a reminder of things that we should be doing all the time, every day, not just in the crisis.
Very well said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I want to jump now to bringing team members back. So, there's a lot of fear right now. There's a lot of unknowns, and that's what causes fear most of the time, and certainly now.
Yes.
But we all do know, and most are really strongly hopeful that sooner rather than later, we're going to be coming back to our practices. There are so many things we have to figure out, everything from financial things to purchasing things to employment things. Infection control will be a big thing. Public reaction, marketing, how to communicate. But all of that involves communication. So tell us some of the basic things, just, not that we can figure it all out now, but give us some insight into what doctors should consider when bringing back the team and getting started again.
Yes, I do believe, Joel, even with all these uncertainties, the leader's mindset is key through all of this. So how a doctor interprets this and how a doctor communicates this to the team will determine a lot of the success rate on how the team will be able to embrace the new normal and really have each other's back. And one of the main things I think that's important when you are starting back. And it won't always be possible to have every team member in the beginning. We don't know what that beginning is going to look like. So I think a few things to consider is the longevity of a team member, key performers, those that are willing to work when you need them most. I think in the beginning, we're going to have to rally around the strongest team members that will help us to successfully get back on track. Now, with that said, dentists must keep in mind that if they applied for that Paycheck Protection Program, that Triple P plan, that stimulus, they have to have their full team fully hired within 8 weeks of receiving that loan. So they want to make sure that it is at a time when they're going to start seeing patients, and there's specific rules with this that they should confirm with their CPA so they can benefit from the forgiveness portion of that loan. That's very important.
Yeah, I'm careful planning because I'm seeing a lot of people reporting on, with all this new information and the SBA and the 2 different loans and with the CARES Act. A lot of people, of course, have been urgently wanting to jump on that, which makes sense for most people. And then I'm seeing other people saying, wait a second, let's step back and see if now is the time for me to do this. So
Correct.
People are being cautious and careful, yet trying to do the right thing. It's tough. It's tough in a crisis that we could never have planned for. We didn't plan for. Nobody did.
No.
To manage through this. So this is really helpful to us.
Yes. And another thing to keep in mind is to see this as an opportunity to build your dream team. If you didn't already have one, one thing that I've seen work well is hiring people from the hospitality industry. And that industry took a hard hit. Their top performers will not be going back to work right away. Consumers will not be traveling quickly, staying at hotels or going out to eat as much as they will be needing to go for healthcare services. So dental practices will gear up much sooner. And top performers from the hospitality industry will not be looking for jobs, not only be looking for jobs, but may also be looking to switch industries. And they will probably think twice about an industry that can be shut down and not able to rebound quickly, while healthcare will always be in high demand.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a good friend who's a senior executive in the dental industry. And he always tells me when we're at a restaurant together that the server, who has this wonderful communication style, he says, wow, I would love to hire them for a dental operation because they know how to communicate. So The value of communication skills it's always important. It probably will be more important. I agree.
Yes.
So I want to talk about best ways, one of the things on everybody's mind is cash flow, which is in a crisis because of the COVID-19. And what are some of the best ways for practice, just some ideas to think about getting cash flow going?
Okay, I have quite a few here. So stay in touch with your families. Be sure to post on your website, like I mentioned before, in social media, that someone is available to answer phone calls and take care of emergency appointments. Also, that the dentist is available to answer any questions. You want to assure your parents that you are accessible. Use social media to inform parents when you will reopen and that you will be using the most currently recommended infection control procedures that OSHA and the CDC are requiring. Doctors, again, this is going back to all of us stepping outside of our comfort zone, Joel, and doing things that we never had to do before. But this is our new normal. Doctors getting comfortable with just doing quick videos, speaking to those patients and parents. They don't need to be long, just a couple of minutes. Will make such a big impact for parents and patients to be able to see the doctor and be reassured that everything's going to be okay. They could even do a fun contest like the floss dance, and the doctor could be doing the floss dance and ask for the parents to post pictures of their kiddos doing that too. Just anything that can keep it light and fun. I think during a time like this, parents would find very helpful.
It's funny you say the floss dance. I can't dance. People have tried to teach me for years.
Oh, come on.
And I've been wanting just now, it's funny you said that, somebody to teach me how to do it. And I'll post it if I ever figure it out. But anyway, I'm sorry. What else did you want to say about
I'll teach you.
that? Yeah.
Making sure also that these appointments that have been postponed, right? Appointments that have been canceled, it is crucial to get these scheduled again as quickly as possible. So having a good system, perhaps an Excel spreadsheet that has the date of the appointment, the patient name, appointment type, and the urgency of this appointment. So we can make sure that we see those patients first. Look at treatment plans and identify children who have the highest chance of developing a dental abscess. Have your front best employee contact these parents and express that the doctor has reviewed patient charts to identify who is at the highest risk and should be seen as soon as the practice opens again. Schedule these kids first, and as soon as you know when you can officially open, make sure that all appointments are rescheduled so they do not get lost. That's been one of the biggest fears, is doctors wondering what's going to happen to all these patients that were in my schedule. We cannot lose them.
So, I think we have to, and people are starting to do that. What you're saying is to make sure we triage our population who are out there, who have treatment plans, and try to now reassign the urgency levels based on what we can do first, et cetera.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's another thing for thinking outside of the box. If you have a lot of working parents in your area, and they're typically the ones that bring the children to the appointments, and they may not be able to take off of work since employers may be stricter with time off requests, consider temporarily modifying business hours with later hours, perhaps 2 or 3 days a week, like a 9:30 to a 6:30 scheduled with staggered lunches. And maybe even, I know this isn't going to be very popular, but this is very temporary in the beginning. Consider maybe 1 or 2 Saturdays per month, working half a day, 8 to noon or 9 to 1, just making sure that the parents realize that you're working with them to be able to see their children.
Providing access, which is what we're about.
Yes.
So speaking of going back, the vendors have great relationships. They're important relationships with us in practice.
Yes.
What are some of the beneficial ways to sort of reevaluate vendors at this time? And should there be some kind of reevaluation?
Absolutely. I think it's a good time to renegotiate supply costs with some of your dental supply companies. What I've learned over the years is that we get really comfortable with that person, that vendor that we have a relationship with. And sometimes we don't realize that we can bargain with them and just tell them, look, this is what I'm going through. This is what I need. And they'll be more than willing to work with you. Consider online companies like net32.com, where doctors are paying 30 to 50% of dental supply fees. So this is a really good time to find alternatives. Credit card merchant services, for instance, Best Card Services is a credit card merchant who serves only dentists and gives them the best credit card rates. This is a good time to review those credit card rates and see who could I get a better deal with. Review insurance policies, business insurance, health insurance, janitorial services. Are you pleased with your current janitorial provider? If not, interview new ones who have more rigorous cleaning protocols. And I think this is going to be a big deal going forward. Talk with your CPA about the possibility of refinancing loans now that interest rates are lower, maybe applying for credit cards with lower interest rates for personal and business purposes. And if your website, this is major, Joel, if this is something that offices should have always been doing, but right now my offices that have this feature are really benefiting from it. If your website does not already have a pay online feature, that is important to get in place immediately so parents can pay those bills at night or on the weekends. And also your online registration. This is a great time to work with your website provider to make sure that those forms and medical history updates are online. Also, crucial, make sure you have a mobile-friendly site.
Yeah, nothing worse than not having one, and it's just very cumbersome and difficult to negotiate.
Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah, so those are great ideas, Lilly, on vendors. I think it's important to balance it because we do have relationships, and it can't be only on the relationship, as you said.
I know.
But on the other hand, where we have equipment involved that needs to be serviced, and I think particularly, and I've heard this, it hasn't been used in a while. We got to do some things. Maybe things suddenly don't work. And the same vendor that's giving us consumables also is servicing our equipment. So we got to have to balance all that.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So what final words do you have? And I think before I ask you that specifically, you've given us a lot of great advice on communication. I think the theme has been communication, which has always been important, but it's been really important. So what final words, positive, you're a positive person, you know the field, you know the business. What kind of encouragement do you have for pediatric dentists across the country?
Yes, this downtime is a great time to reevaluate your vision, your mission statement, your core values, and to get those in alignment so that when you are able to start up again, you could start with this fresh new perspective. I think that if we look at this as an opportunity, again, to learn and grow, to hone in on our leadership skills, listen to podcasts such as this one that will help us understand how to be better leaders, how to be better business people. We also know now more than ever, you must operate your dental practice in smart business ways. That is, have great people on your team, work with efficient systems, and most importantly, use these great leadership skills so that people can really look up to you and know that if you're okay and you're sending this message that everything's going to be okay, they can trust you. Also, another thought is to take heart. After 2008, during the Great Recession, when the company was owned by Julie Weir, we learned that pediatric dentistry is somewhat recession-proof. Even when there was high unemployment, we saw that parents put their children first and made sure that they received the care that they needed. We feel we will see this trend again and that pediatric dentistry will come through this. I've mentioned this to some clients and they've mentioned to me the concern that this one will be different because parents will fear that their child can be infected if they go to the dentist now. And it's important that your website again and social media clearly explain that the practice is following CDC and OSHA guidelines fully to ensure everyone's safety. Explain what that means and follow through on it. Prepare verbiage. I think it's really important to prepare verbiage for your team in the practice. And practice with them so everyone is well versed on what to say and how to answer questions quickly and correctly.
That's great advice and really optimistic and realistic and helpful. Thank you so much, Lilly, for being with us today on Pedo Teeth Talk.
Thank you. And Joel, I want to say real quick, if any doctor who is listening has a question about what has been discussed, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help the amazing AAPD members who work so hard to serve the children in this country.
Thank you very much, Lilly.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning into Pedo Teeth Talk, where we bring you the contemporary issues important to you and your practice, brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. We'll see you here next time.
Pedo Teeth Talk is brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, the show that delivers cutting-edge ideas for the professional specializing in pediatric dentistry. If you have any questions or comments, please email info@aapd.org. We welcome your ideas for future shows and guests. For more information on the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, visit aapd.org.